Good overnight, and let's start part 3 of tonight's From Day One. Tonight we go back deep in the archives to dark matter, to precursor to Midnight in the Desert, for Timothy Good, who's going to be talking about extraterrestrial and UFO encounters. So buckle up, let's hit the road to get to the great American Southwest for tonight's Art Bell in Dark Matter.
Want to take a ride? From the high desert and the great American Southwest, exclusively on Sirius XM Radio, this is Dark Matter with your host, Art Bell. Now, here's Art.
Extraterrestrial Radio Dark Riders, welcome. I am Art Bell. What an adventure we're going to have tonight with Timothy Good. I mean, you probably know that name. Anybody in ufology circles knows that name. But I have a number of things first. Much like Obamacare website, we're having a little bit of trouble with some people getting cut off. And it's vexing, to say the least. There are various error codes one might encounter: 1001, 500 and something, 300 and something, I don't know, all kinds. So we can use your help in trying to figure out what the hell's wrong. You don't want people cut off. So if you're listening on the web, whatever you're listening on, here's what I want you to do. When you get cut off, make note of it, the time it occurred, tell me where you are, and tell me what kind of operating system you are using. And email me. This is how it could conceivably get cured. I say conceivably. So send your cutoff report, please, to artbell at artbell.com. That's artbell at artbell.com. Attention hams, amateur radio operators. Our sun is going berserk. Ladies and gentlemen, our sun has come alive. Really come alive. There are some pretty ominous things facing Earth. We're right at the end of a long gun barrel right now. And it's amazing to see, and I'm going to see to it that you see it. Because up on my website right now, we have this lovely gal who actually looks like a network weather girl. Except she's talking about what's going on in the sun right now. And she explains it really, really well. It is fascinating. There are some big storms. You might even call it the perfect storm headed toward us. There have been 4 large flares, and they're all headed our way. I mean, these spots are pointed right at Earth. So, you're going to want to check it out. I'm sure you'll think... you're going to want to check it out. I'm sure you'll think, you hear things like light to moderate X-rays, with proton showers possible, and you're going to watch for that occasional gamma ray burst. No. She'll explain the technical side of it, and it really is fascinating. If you've ever wondered, finally, our sun is raging in the night and the day. And so that makes for wonderful conditions on the radio until the storms hit, then there'll be nothing. Anyway, you really want to see this, go to artbell.com, click on the Sun Weather Gal. Gee, that's well done. I've never seen that before, but it's very, very well done. I am coming to the conclusion that school shootings here in America are becoming the new normal. Massachusetts, here in Nevada, little town, Sparks, in Nevada, they are becoming the new norm. I mean, you hear about them all the time now. Are we going to get used to that? Are we really going to get used to school shootings in the news? Remember, we've got a ghost picture contest underway, and judging is underway, too, and it all ends this Sunday, or the submission part of it anyway, this Sunday at noon. It's all over. So if you have a ghost story, send it to Ghostmaster. No, just kidding. Send it to Webmaster at heartbell.com. If you've got a ghost story, send it to me. A one-paragraph summary is just fine, and then your phone number, and we'll call you when we do our Halloween show. Spooky matter. Well, one comet yesterday exploded. ISON, however, is still on track to amaze and or disappoint. We'll have to find out. The one comet did explode. But sometimes when they get near the sun, it's just too much for them, and they go. I was talking to somebody earlier tonight about something that, let me give you the rest of the reasons to go to the website right now. A UFO caught by multiple cameras. That's always good, right? If you're in doubt, multiple cameras in Jerusalem. That's on the website. A giant alien in Peru is on the website. An unknown but disgusting life form has been filmed intimately in North Carolina. This thing is growing in the North Carolina sewers, and it's disgusting. I mean, it's really just, yeah, some new life form they claim growing in the North Carolina sewers. Watch it if you got the guts. It really is pretty awful looking. No idea what it is. Don't really want to know what it is. Definitely don't want to go down, and I wouldn't be that close with the camera. I hope I had a zoom lens, or the gal, whoever took it. Got a flash from my own company, Sirius XM. 2 Sirius XM employees. I wonder if I'm supposed to read this. Internal memo. Well, all right. It's about something very public. Tomorrow, Sirius XM is going to launch the FM6 satellite. It's actually not the FM6 spacecraft, but satellite. And it's going up on a Proton Russian rocket from Baikonur Cosmodrome. That's in Kazakhstan. On an ILS Proton rocket. It can be viewed. In other words, you can see the launch and the spectacular success of our new satellite, and or a spectacular destruction of an incredibly expensive satellite in Russia. One of those two things will happen. So if you would like to see that one way or the other, you might want to wander over to my website, again, artbell.com, and there will be live video from Russia of the launch. Pretty cool stuff, actually. All right, glancing, if I dare, briefly at the national news. I really want to do this. In Massachusetts, a teacher who was allegedly killed by one of her own class students apparently had to ask to stay after school the day she was killed. This teacher was a beautiful young gal who was, her picture has been around, poor gal, who was revered by her students and shot by one of them, allegedly. This is why I hate the news. Residents of a Northern California community expressed skepticism Thursday about a sheriff deputy's decision to shoot a popular 13-year-old boy who was carrying a pellet gun that looked apparently like an assault rifle. I'm going to give up reading this stuff pretty soon. A former Ohio doctor accused of killing a pregnant woman last year by injecting her with heroin after she answered a Craigslist ad, pleaded guilty Thursday in her death. And, of course, that of her nearly full-term unborn child. Or we can look down here. Dallas police will seek a grand jury indictment against an officer who was fired after shooting a mentally ill man in a disputed incident caught on tape. I may not read this stuff anymore. And finally, something that's not what I just read. No one likes to believe so when a recent Texas high school football game ended in a score of 91-0. One angry parent filed a complaint, a lawsuit, I guess, alleging the contest had crossed the line from tough loss to unlawful torment. So they're filing a lawsuit. I mean, you got to laugh at something, right? And what was there to laugh at in any of the other stories? But 91-0, unlawful torment. In other words, once they were far enough ahead, I guess the thought here is they should have had the grace to stop. But no, they just went and got as many touchdowns as they could. There's going to be a loss only in America. Boy, I guarantee only in America. Okay, Fukushima, there's a lot of really possibly negative news about Fukushima because TEPCO is about to try to remove these spent fuel rods from reactor number 4. Now, this is going to be one hell of a dangerous, very dangerous job. And it's going to be going on for quite a long time. These things are heavy, really, really heavy, and there are many of them. During this period, TEPCO plans to carefully remove more than 1,300 used fuel rod assemblies, packing radiation 14,000 times the equivalent of a Hiroshima nuclear bomb from the cooling pool. The operation to begin removing fuel from such a severely damaged pool has never been attempted, ever. The rods are unwieldy, heavy, each one weighing about, get this, 2/3 of a ton. And all this has to be done not automatically, as most things are in such a case, but by human beings. Good luck to us. Should the attempt fail, a mishandled rod could be exposed to air and catch fire, resulting in horrific quantities of radiation released into the atmosphere, and the resulting radiation will be too great for the cooling pool to absorb, as it simply has not been designed to do it. Of course, the whole pile of these things could come crashing down. That would be the worst case scenario. And if that happened, it would be an apocalypse. Reactor 4 contains about 10 times more cesium-137 than Chernobyl did. So the more you read about this, the more frightening it absolutely is. It is absolutely frightening. And one more frightening thing for you. The oarfish that are washing ashore in California are thought to be precursors of an earthquake. Now, they did wash ashore. These are deep, deep, deep ocean bottom dwellers, you know, big giant fish. They almost look like something alien, but they inhabit the bottom of the ocean, and the thought is when there's tectonic movement, the oarfish that like the bottom immediately detect it and take off like bandits. Oarfish wash ashore in Japan before the big one. Oarfish are washing ashore in California now, too. Extremely rare and something to be concerned about. All right, well, I've got so much more. As I said, we have riches of material tonight. Certainly, you're going to want to go to artbell.com. First opportunity you get it, obviously. If you're out there in a truck, don't do it. I know that there's a temptation when I talk about these things. Coming up in a moment, you've heard his name, I'm sure now, probably all your life, or a good part of it, Timothy Good and UFOs on Dark Matter. Yes, raging in the night. I hear the drums echoing tonight. All right, coming up, Timothy Good. Timothy is regarded as one of the world's leading civilian authorities on alien phenomena, known for his integrity and his determination as a highly skilled researcher. He has lectured at the Royal Canadian Military Institute, Royal Naval Air Station, Portland, the House of Lords All-Party UFO Study Group, the Institute of Medical Laboratory Sciences, and the Oxford and Cambridge Union Societies. In 1998, he was invited to discuss the subject at the Pentagon's Defense Airborne Reconnaissance Office. Wow. And at the headquarters of the French Air Force in 2002. He has also acted as a consultant for several U.S. congressional investigations, is author of a dozen books on the subject, including Above Top Secret, Alien Contact, Alien Base, Unearthly Disclosure, and Need to Know UFOs, the Military and Intelligence. Timothy lives in London, England, and that is, I think, where we find him. Timothy, good evening.
Good evening to you, sir.
Wow. Pretty good connection, I would say. You're in London?
I am.
Well, then I'm impressed. Pretty good. Pretty good stuff. All right. Gee, where to begin? When did we last talk, Timothy?
I think, Art, if my memory serves, it was about 2005.
It's been a long time.
It might have been more recently than that, but...
No, 2005 sounds about right to me.
Okay.
So it's really extra wonderful to have you back on the program.
Well, thank you.
And perhaps you would like to summarize everything that's happened between 2005 and 2013 today.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Can you start off there? Just kidding, Timothy.
I can certainly give some
I bet you could.
quite a bit been going on recently.
Mm-hmm. Actually, there is. I've got this wealth of UFO photographs and all the rest of it up on the website. It seems to be coming on a daily basis now. All kinds of sightings all over. It's kind of exciting, actually.
Yeah, good.
So how did you get into this field, UFOs, aliens, that kind of thing, in the first place?
That's a very good question, Art. It goes back to the mid-1950s, would you believe, when a cousin of my mother's, a distant cousin of my mother's, a guy called Edmund C. Berkeley, visited and stayed with us in our family home, and he knew of my passion for aviation and space travel. So he said, Timothy, what do you know about flying saucers? And this guy, they say, Edmund C. Berkeley, he was the first person to write on computers and automation. In fact, I think that was his first book back in the sort of like 1947, something like that.
Right.
And he was a highly respected guy, apparently. And he said to me, Timothy, you like airplanes and spaceships, you need to know about flying saucers. So he gave me this book called The Flying Saucers Are Real by Major Donald Kehoe. It was a paperback. I still have it to this day. And I was enthralled because there were all these reports from airline pilots, commercial pilots, obviously, and military pilots. And, even if the pilots had been drinking, the radar sets had not. So I think you'll find in most cases where craft are reported by pilots, it's supported by radar. And, of course, that's the clincher for me, because radar actually is extremely sophisticated, far more sophisticated than people think, especially these days.
Yes.
I can remember, I was told by some naval military guys about 15 years ago that, and they were talking in terms of years before then, that the Americans had a very sophisticated line of sight radar which could actually determine the types of engines from the fan blades of Russian bombers.
Wow, that is a wow. They get that kind of. I'm curious, Timothy, on radar, how would that be represented, or would it be interpreted by a computer?
Well, I wouldn't know. I don't have the technical expertise to answer that one, Art. But
that's
certainly the radar is extremely sophisticated and getting increasingly sophisticated, if not completely perfected by now.
Oh, I can only imagine what the top level, military stuff is able to do. They're always way ahead of the rest of us. That's amazing. That's really amazing. You can tell the type of an engine on radar, direct reflect radar. Incredible. Okay, so I can see how your interest was sparked. Now for me, it didn't take a sighting, and it was really funny, Timothy. After I got interested in ufology, really fascinated by it, I had, my own little sighting or big sighting, and at that point, life changes, and you know what you saw.
Yeah.
And after that, how about you? Have you ever had that moment where you saw something that was not in dispute because it was not from here?
Yes, I have. It was very few and far between over the years. But the first one was 1963 when I think it was August the 1st, 1963, if memory serves me. I was sitting out in the garden, of my parents' garden, and we all spotted this brilliant point of light in the sky. It was a relatively clear sky. And I turned my binoculars on it, and it was like a sort of cone-shaped, triangular-shaped object. Mm-hmm. And photographs were taken by United States Air Force planes. Forget the Royal Air Force. The U.S. Air Force was there before our people, and they took gun camera film of it. And it was a very large object, just suspended, just hanging there for about an hour and a half. And as I say, clear photographs were taken. In my book Above Top Secret, I reproduced a photograph taken by a chap on the ground who I knew, a pilot on the ground who took it through his telescope, and it's quite clear.
Okay, so
that was the first.
You personally observed this, right?
Yes, I did, for about an hour.
So an hour and a half. That's really, really a long sighting.
Thousands of witnesses all over London and the home counties saw this thing.
So my question is, after you had that personal experience,
yeah,
how did that change? Did that bring you to a new level, even beyond a sort of casual interest that you mentioned, or even an intense interest from reading that book?
Yes, definitely, no question about it. I mean, that sort of clinched it for me.
I see. So then you began investigating UFO encounters of many, many others. Is that a fair assessment of what you've been doing all these years?
Absolutely, non-stop.
Alrighty. To the sake of my audience, many of whom are doubters, I would ask you, I think, how you vet when you come upon somebody and a report, and maybe you've got photography, you've certainly got stories, witness stories. How do you vet these things to decide the wheat from the chaff?
Oh, it can be very difficult. Witnesses are vital. And, of course, so the caliber of the witness becomes paramount. You need to know whether they're absolutely on the level, or they're just fantasizing, or they're just trying to, pull the wool over your eyes. So you have to be very careful. But I've met a lot of very genuine witnesses. That's for sure.
I would imagine you've met both camps.
Yes, absolutely. I've lectured to what you Americans call skeptics with a K. We call them SC. So you have to be very careful. But I've met a lot of very genuine witnesses. That's for sure.
I would imagine you've met both camps.
Yes, absolutely. I've lectured to what you Americans call skeptics with a K. We call them SCEPTICS. We have them over here too. And the amusing thing about the groups that call themselves skeptics is that they're not genuinely skeptical. They're debunkers, actually. Skepticism is absolutely warranted reaction to all this stuff, anything really, bizarre and peculiar. But just to debunk it, they should call themselves debunkers rather than skeptics, because they just will rubbish everything to do with it.
Yes, well, it's been my observation. I deal with a lot of photographs. When you're doing a talk show about this kind of thing, you get a lot of photographs, and frankly, a lot of them are probably baloney. However, here's what I figured out. If you have a really, blurry photograph of a UFO, people go, "Oh, come on."
Sure.
Even though even though somebody grabbed a camera in a hurry, probably was moving as they were in shock almost viewing this craft. And of course, you get a slightly blurry photograph. And then on the other end of the scale, Timothy, you have people very rarely with a high-quality camera, fast film, and a steady hand, even in a scary situation, and they come up with something that's just astoundingly clear, and then that same group of people says, oh, Photoshop!
Yeah, that's it.
So, and gradients in between. So there will be no photograph that they would say, wow, looks like the real thing.
Yeah, and you know, online, I sort of check every day. I get sort of Google alerts to the UFO situation stories in the press and media generally and everything, and it's very interesting. An awful lot of photographs are quite obviously birds that just happen to fly by in mid-flap and get caught in the camera. And unfortunately, you can look at those online every day, and people think, oh, I didn't see anything at the time. Well, you wouldn't normally if a bird zooms by, but people do capture them, and a bird like a seagull in mid-flap looks like a disc on edge. So it's no wonder people are fooled. So one has to be very, very careful. But as you know, over the years, some great photographs and film have been taken.
Oh, I know. Do you have a favorite? I mean, of all the things that you've researched, do you have a favorite? One that just sails over every bar that you set?
What, a sighting or photographs or what? Sorry, can you be more specific?
Oh, I mean to be non-specific, whether it's a sighting, a photograph, a creature, witness encounters. In other words, something that just is over the top legit.
Well, I can only speak for myself. I have had several encounters with people who I believe were aliens, and the first one was in 1963 when I was touring the United States with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. And I forget exactly where we were. All I can remember is that it was about 512 miles from Tucson, something like it was a 512-mile journey from Tucson, Arizona to Los Angeles, and we were kindly given a 1-hour stop during that 512-mile flight to get our evening meal. Mm-hmm. And we stopped at this diner. And I saw, I was with 3 colleagues. We were sitting by a window, and we'd got our food. And I noticed, waiting in line, not that far away, was a very petite, extremely attractive, very unusual-looking girl. And there was just something about her which alerted me. And I put out the thought in my mind, if you're from elsewhere, would you mind just passing by and giving me some kind of proof? That was all in my mind. Like a minute later, when she came out of line, she might have been carrying a cup of coffee or something like that. I can't remember precisely, but she came past the table and did a very low, gracious curtsy and bow, and then she just stood up, deadpan expression, and walked away. And, I had 3 witnesses with me, and they said, Tim, hi, what's that all about? How did you get to know her? And I was mesmerized, and that was the first in 63. And then in 1967, there was, in some ways, a more convincing one. I was staying at what was then the Park Sheraton Hotel. I think it's off of 7th Avenue in New York. We had a series of concerts at Carnegie Hall with the great Russian cellist Mstislav Rostropovich. And he used to conduct the Washington Symphony, by the way, as you probably may recall, and great guy. And I sent out a message. I sat in the lobby of the Park Sheraton Hotel, New York, and I sent out a thought. If any of you guys from elsewhere are in the New York vicinity, would you please come and sit down beside me and prove it? Well, people come and go in hotel lobbies. And after about, 30, 35 minutes, this chap comes in, and there's something about him. He's immaculately dressed, about 5 foot 5'8", something like that, maybe 5'9".
Yes.
I would say slightly tanned skin, fair wavy hair. He was absolutely immaculate. He looked at me. He came and sat down beside me. He took out an attaché case from which he pulled the New York Times, and he turned the pages over like every few seconds, very, very slowly and deliberately, then folded the newspaper, put it back in his attaché case, and closed the zip. So I thought, okay, here we go. So in my mind, I said, right, if you're the guy I'm looking for, would you take your right index finger and hold it to the right side of your nose and keep it there? He did immediately. He did that immediately. And people then say, Tim, why don't you talk to these guys? And
well, yes.
I just didn't feel it was appropriate somehow. But that was it. I had my proof in a way that there are people who can read your mind, and I've had, a couple of other experiences. The last one was in Poland, probably about eight years ago, I would say, in Wrocław in Poland.
Yes.
And I was the featured guest at a prestigious debating salon. It was called the Professor Dudek's Salon in Wrocław, and I'd never been invited to such a prestigious event, and I was the guest of honor, and I had to give a presentation, and then there would be questions from the audience. And there were about 80 people there. They were mostly retired, I would say, military people. There were college professors, psychologists, who were the first to vent their wrath at me after my presentation, but that's another story. It was very funny. There were military guys there who got so outraged by the psychologists that they stood up, and I think one of them had his uniform on, and they said, "You don't know what you're talking about. We guys have to chase these things." My colleague here, and he had another pilot, stood up and said, I've had these things on my wing and everything. And it was very, very a lively debate. I had noticed throughout a very interesting looking person, very similar to the guy that I'd seen back in 1967 in New York, similar olive skin. He was a bit thinner. He was also immaculately dressed. And I just thought there was something about him. I tried a bit of telepathy. There was no response. Anyway, he was the last person to give a short presentation. You weren't allowed to talk for, I think, more than about 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. It might have been a little bit more, I'm not sure. But he was the last person to speak. The subject of his short speech was Earth's future in space. And so I thought, gosh, this has got to be interesting. I was absolutely fascinated by what he said. So I thought, I've got to talk to this guy. People say, Tim, why don't you talk to these guys? So after the whole thing had finished, he was the last person giving a short presentation. He came towards me. I put out my hand. He held it in a very cold way. He just looked at me, unblinking, and he did not say a word. I just said to him, I think you have a great deal of knowledge. Thank you for your presentation and everything. There was absolutely not a flicker. And then he walked away. I think I gave him my business card, but I've certainly not heard from him. But the extraordinary thing is that I then met with my colleagues who were going home. None of us had drinks at that point. We certainly had them when we got back to where I was being put up in a converted castle. But everybody said, gosh, that was interesting, And I said, well, who is that guy? And he said, he's often here. He's always got something very interesting to say. And I said, yes, what did he actually discuss? And they said, it was about Earth's future in space. I said, yes, but what did he say? Nobody in that room, well, maybe some, but nobody that I was aware of could remember what he had said, and I certainly hadn't a clue. It's gone. So I just wonder whether that was something that was projected into the minds of the audience subliminally. I do not know, but it was slightly disturbing, I have to say. And the interesting thing is that the speaker, the guest of honor, is by contract supposed to get an audio tape of the entire proceedings, supposed to get photographs because there were photographers there.
Yes.
You're supposed to get this and that. I couldn't get a reply from anybody to do, or even Professor Dudek, who had invited me. Nobody. I couldn't get any kind of response whatsoever. So that's really just about the end of the story.
Yeah, okay. Timothy, I'm going to join, with the crowd that says, oh, come on, Timothy, why didn't you take the opportunity to speak to them? Why didn't
I did. I spoke to him. I said, I think you have a great deal of knowledge.
Right.
But I could see he wasn't going to say a word, so, I stayed stum.
Right, but I mean, there could conceivably be so much more you could ask, and so many more tests you could run. I mean, if you successfully have a guy and you mentally project this to touch his nose, well, all right, a million questions. For example, Timothy, aren't you concerned that you really did not connect with somebody from somewhere else, but you do have a talent for projecting suggestions to people, perhaps through telepathy? And so that doesn't necessarily mean they're from elsewhere, or when you said if there's anyone from elsewhere, please make yourself known now. I mean, how do you know you're just not, I don't know, projecting telepathy?
Could be.
And how could you not test it
could
further?
be, but there's something about these guys that I've encountered about their sort of demeanor and the presence. There's just something different about these people. For me.
Where are you from? How did you get here? Why are you here?
You're right, but this chap didn't say anything to me. I spoke to him very briefly. I said, I think you have a great deal of knowledge. He said absolutely nothing.
No?
I could have spoken to the guy in New York, I'm quite sure, but I just didn't feel it was appropriate, and I just sat there and I thought, well, he might say something to me, but he didn't either. So there we are.
Okay, it is what it is. Hold tight. I'm going to take a quick break here. You can relax a little bit, grab a cup of whatever it is you like, or a glass of whatever it is you like, and we'll come back and do more of this. It's Dark Matter. Imaginary lover, never turn you down. My guest is Timothy Good, all the way from London, England. And it's interesting. Asked him for the best documented case he ever ran into, and he gave me a personal case that I can identify with. Now, I know every time I see a really cute girl, I too have mental projections. But they've never resulted in even so much as a curtsy. Timothy, welcome back. So what you gave us obviously was a personal best, as it were. And you know what? I get it. If I had done that and people had responded that way, I would also regard that as incredible stuff. But when you tell it to other people, they're going to regard that as, oh, come on.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've had a lot of that, right?
Well, let me tell you a little follow-up to that case from Poland 8 years ago, which I think it was in Wrocław. People say, Jim, why don't you get some pictures of these guys? Why don't you talk to them? Well, as you know, I tried to talk to the guy, and he didn't say a word. He just looked at me, with blinking eyes. But I did try and get a photograph in the break, because he was actually sitting like about 10 feet away, 12 feet maybe at most away from me. Among the audience, and I got my camera. I started doing a sort of panoramic shots. I needed to take 3 shots because of there were about 80 people there, and this was during an interval. In fact, so there weren't that many people. So I thought, there's this guy sitting there. I'll get a shot of him. As I got to the area where he was sitting and just about to press the shutter, a voice boomed out and said, the speaker's not allowed to take pictures. And I looked around. That was a disembodied voice. There was nobody to be seen who actually said that to me. So I sort of looked blankly around and said, oh, I do apologize. So there you are.
So you're a contactee.
In a way. I suppose I am. Yes, certainly not a regular one. These things happen like every, maybe decades go by and nothing happens. But I have had a few encounters of the close kind.
Apparently so. Now, if we move from that to the best documented case that didn't happen to you personally, where would we go?
Oh, my goodness me. There are so many arts. I don't know. In many respects, it's a controversial choice, but I have to say, much as George Adamski has been maligned, in my new book, I'm trying to sort of improve his image, if you like, by pointing out that he was very serious-minded, he was very knowledgeable, that he actually had a United States government ordinance passed which gave him access to all military bases, not just throughout the United States, but throughout the world. Furthermore, he was consulted by Kennedy, I believe another president, I'm not sure who it was. He was also treated with great respect at the Vatican. On several occasions he had meetings with Pope John the 23rd, and another meeting, I think, with one of the Pope Pius, I forget the number after following his name, but he did have genuine encounters with aliens. Of that I'm absolutely sure. And his photographs, I know quite a bit about photography. I have studied them very closely. All his photographs are genuine. The classic flying saucer ones from Flying Saucers Have Landed, which many people, the first book for many people to read. And he took most of his photographs were taken through, in some cases, a powerful telescope, because he was an astronomer. He had a telescope in his, in his where he lived in Palomar Terraces, and he got some great photographs. And the thing is that in my new book, a lot of the information relating to Adamski has been vindicated by other people. This is the so-called Amicizia case, which is extremely controversial. I've devoted one long chapter to the Amicizia case, and I return to it in a later chapter.
Perhaps you could describe it here.
Essentially, yes, certainly. This is something that went on for decades around the world, actually. Meetings with aliens who collaborated with some of our scientists and people from all walks of life. It went on for a very long time. And were it not for the fact that I met one of the people who was involved for 40 years, I would have been extremely skeptical. But this was absolutely on the level. And the amount of information that has been passed, including technological information provided for me by Professor Stefano Breccia, who sadly died a couple of years ago. I got to know him, and my girlfriend and I visited him on 2 occasions in Italy, and we got a tremendous amount of information. He was a scientist. He lectured at the Russian Academy of Sciences, and so on and so forth. And he had meetings with these people on a regular basis for nearly 40 years.
Well, all right. You said he had a great deal of specific technical information.
Yeah.
Can you hit a few high points of that? I'm very interested.
Oh my goodness, you put me on the spot there. Well, if I'll have to just have a look, because technologically I don't understand a lot of it myself, I have to say, but there is certainly some information. If I can just flick through my book here, just to get some information.
Because anything technical is particularly fascinating to me, and many others,
exactly.
even if you don't get it.
Yeah. I'm just having a look here.
No hurry. Anything technical is just wonderful, and I would love to hear it.
No, I'm there now. Let's just have a look here. The type of what Stefano gave me. Let's talk about the Adamski craft. Stefano Breccia told me that that much of what he learned attests to the validity of a number of Adamski's disputed claims and provides a great deal of new scientific and technical data. For example, he reports that the Adamski Bell type craft, the famous ones, which is about some people think it was about 27 feet, any measurements go up to 35 feet. Adamski's, the one with the three spheres underneath, the classic ones, are very similar to those produced by a race that these people in Italy from all walks of life were involved in, with the Amicizia people. And he does, there are actual diagrams of the craft showing similarities with some of these crafts. And Stefano told me that he went with a German engineer in one of these craft on one occasion, which was being monitored at all times by the aliens from their own craft and from their other highly technological instruments, which they were.
You're saying he claimed to have actually gone on to the craft.
Stefano Breccia went on this craft, and which was flown by a German friend of his who had learnt it from these aliens, and they taught us how to fly some of these craft, and they have even given us some of these craft. I learned, for example, that the Italian Air Force there were 10 pilots from the Italian Air Force who had flown these things. That was several years ago. I don't know what the situation is like today. But there's no question that a lot of this was very real.
Now, it's a very strong statement to say there is no question that it was real when you're talking about aliens having given us craft and apparently trained us in how to.
That's correct. Absolutely. In the United States, since the 1950s, I was told, we have been given craft, and even some of our astronauts have flown these craft. Gordon Cooper, who I knew, who was a supporter of mine, I had the great privilege of. I never actually met him, but we corresponded and spoke. But he told a friend of mine, who I trust implicitly, that he himself had flown some of these craft on quite a number of occasions, and that he was actually prepared back in 1978 to fly one of these craft and land it in front of the United Nations building in New York, if it ever came to people wanting proof.
That would be proof, all right. But I've interviewed Gordon, never a peep. Many years ago, I interviewed Gordon, and never a peep about that.
Right. Well, these guys keep their secrets, but certainly he told someone that I know, obviously, who I wouldn't name. He gave a lot of information away.
These are extraordinary claims, and what is it that causes you to believe these to be true?
I think, well, I never, as I say, I never had face-to-face conversations with Gordon Cooper, but I just found him convincing the way he dealt with people, other people
yes.
I do. But there's certainly no proof. I can't prove it. But and I'm sure that, as I say, I'm told that other astronauts have been flying these craft, but it's not something I'm in a position to prove. I wish I could.
I wish you could too. It does kind of get to extraordinary claims and extraordinary evidence and all of that. It's very interesting, but boy, oh boy, oh boy. And here's somebody writing to me, John, able to send me a message on the computer through something we call the wormhole. He says, Roswell's aren't. I believe Timothy wrote in Above Top Secret that Neil Armstrong witnessed UFOs on the moon.
Yes.
Can you ask him about that? I wrote NASA, and they sent me a form letter of denial.
Well, let me tell you something. I had a friend, she's deceased now, a very good friend, called Pamela Hanford. I've been able to name her. I did allude to the case in Above Top Secret, but I've gone into much more detail in my new book. And I've named her Pamela Hanford. She'd served with Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, better known as MI6. And I once asked about her background in that clandestine organization. And she said, bearing in mind that I'm still firmly bound by the Official Secrets Act, all I can tell you is that I trained with the School of Military Intelligence in those days at Maresfield Park and did my parachute training with the London 21st. I was trained for the Russian front, learned Russian, and came under MI6's umbrella. Because of the sensitivity of the field work, I can tell you nothing more. Now, she was invited to a classified conference by NASA. This conference was held at several venues in Italy in 1984, including the Europa Palace Hotel in Anna Capri. Now, some of the astronauts were staying there, and Pamela actually overheard a conversation. She was probably taping it, I guess now, looking back on it, but she had a conversation in the next room because Neil Armstrong actually was in the bedroom next to hers and Buzz Aldrin was in the one beyond that. But she had this conversation with a Professor Herbert Schwartz with Armstrong, and I think she recorded it. And this Professor Schwartz said, what really happened out there with Apollo 11? He was asking Armstrong. It was incredible. Of course, we'd always known there was a possibility. The fact is, we were warned off. There was never any question of our building a space station or a moon city. And then Professor Schwartz says, well, how do you mean warned off?
That's what I would have asked.
Right, Armstrong. I can't go into details except to say that their ships were far superior to ours, both in size and technology. Boy, were they big and menacing. No, there is no question of a space station, so he claimed.
Oh my God.
And then Schwartz says, but NASA had other missions after Apollo 11. Armstrong said, naturally, NASA was committed at that time and couldn't risk a panic on Earth, but it really was a quick trip and back again. Now, later that day, Pamela confronted Armstrong, who confirmed that the story was true but refused to go into any further detail beyond admitting that the Central Intelligence Agency was behind the cover-up. But officially, of course, he denied everything. There were no objects reported found or seen on Apollo 11 or any other Apollo flight other than of natural origin, is what Armstrong told me.
Well, I will say this, Timothy. I have interviewed quite a large number of astronauts, and their interviews are always riveting, and they're always puzzling. In one case, I spoke to an astronaut who could not remember what it was like to be on the moon, and
good Lord,
I found that to be really puzzling. Yes, good Lord is a way to put it. But he was being absolutely honest, and he said, I said, Edgar Mitchell, please give me a sense of how it felt, how your emotions were, what it felt like beneath your feet, what you were thinking about as you looked at the landscape, as you looked at the stars and realized you were standing on the moon. He said, Art, it's really strange. I can't give you that. I can't give you that. And, Timothy, that's just beyond all reason. How could you, it would be the high point of certainly an astronaut's life to walk on the moon. I guess you could be in some sort of state of shock, perhaps, but gosh, you would be making, or I would be making, I can only relate it to myself, really hard mental notes about everything I saw, touched, felt, experienced. I would lock that in my memory for all time.
Yeah. Sure.
So to hear that Armstrong, that Armstrong, who was a very quiet guy, I mean, he said so little in public all these years, actually said that they were warned off the moon by gigantic craft.
Yeah. That's what he told my friend Pamela anyway. And Pamela also told me that the United States was in contact with a certain planet. She didn't give me what planet or anything, but they were having regular communications and meetings and so forth.
God. You mentioned that somebody saw the Pope.
That's George Adams. On several occasions.
Yes. Okay. My question, Timothy, is: did he have a conversation with the Pope about this subject? And if so, what did the Pope say? Do you know offhand?
Well, I can describe. There was one meeting he had, a private audience at the Vatican with the then ailing Pope John the 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 1963. To deliver an important package, he said that he had been given to him by one of his alien contacts, and this was to be delivered to Pope John the 23rd. When he came out, this is what my friend Lou Zinstad, who accompanied him, of course she wasn't allowed into the Vatican, but she was with another friend, and she said that when George came out, he was grinning like a monkey. He said, I was received by the Pope, he gave me his blessing, and I gave him the message. He told my friend that the Pope was not lying in the room above St. Peter's Square, as the people had been told, but that his bedroom faced the most beautiful part of the Vatican garden. Mm-hmm. And Adamski thought, if you ask me, the Pope is hardly a dying man. They haven't yet tried to operate on him, but I'm sure that's what they will do soon. Anyway, the poor Pope John died a few days later. But
do you know the nature of the message that he delivered?
No, Adamski never gave that away. And what the Pope said was, my son, this is what I have been waiting for. And then he spoke privately in a very low and soft voice for a few minutes to Adamski. And I think his last words to Adamski were, my son, don't worry, we will make it. And then Adamski was ushered out. And
wow.
Pope John died 2 days later, apparently.
Oh, what a story. Okay, you're just sort of blowing me away here with all kinds of things that I had not heard previously, and don't we wish we knew the nature of that message?
Yes, indeed. I think that the Vatican has a very good intelligence service, and I think they're very well informed about this subject. Mm-hmm. I don't think one can say the same for the Church of England, the Protestant Church of England over in the United Kingdom. I don't think there's very little interest.
Timothy, there have been some, I believe, bishops who have made some amazing statements in recent years. Yes. From the Vatican, right?
Yes.
Do you know the nature of them?
Well,
and that's where we will leave Art Bell for this evening. To hear what the Vatican said, you'll have to return with us next time as we return back to extraterrestrials and UFOs. Till then, as always, please make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Get us to the goal of 50,000 views, 1,000 subscribers. So Boxy sends us those nice red packages, and YouTube will give us some attention. CoinBase and Ibotta are below, as you know. Fill them out, get $10 free for both services. CoinBase, of course, lets you do CoinBase Learn, 2-minute lessons, 1-question quizzes to get up to $100 free crypto. Crypto is usable in Dominion for anything you like, whether it be Valkyrie's Favors, Diamonds, not Diamonds, Emerald, special packages, or anything you want, especially even during the discounts going on right now during the anniversary. Of course, on Ibotta will reward you for what you normally do anyway, which is grocery shopping. Until then, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Be kind to one another, and it's always a great new world to release the Krakens in each and every one of you. Have a great evening, enjoy your good night's rest, and we'll see you tomorrow as we march along here from day one. Have a great night, everybody.